Hi, everybody. My name is Cece,
And I'm AA Ron.
and we work for the Crisis Center of West Texas. The Crisis Center provides services for survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault here in the Permian Basin. We have a shelter here, free counseling services, free legal services, anything a survivor might need, we can help them out. It doesn't matter if the assault or situation happened 50 years ago or last week, we're able to provide these free services for people in our community. We do serve 9 counties as well. So we have that aspect of the Crisis Center, and then we have something called prevention education, which is more or less what we do. We try to inform the community through different events and schools on topics of domestic violence and sexual assault to hopefully prevent those things from happening in the future.
For sure. And today's topic, we're going to be talking about consent. I think this is something that doesn't get talked about a lot, and I feel like it needs to be talked about more, especially towards young boys and men. This is something that I really didn't learn about until I started working at the Crisis Center about 4 years ago. So it's something that is near and dear to my heart. It's something that I want to get out there and converse and have conversations about. And help educate people on it.
Yeah, I think that's kind of our main purpose of doing this event with the Cactus House is just informing people and kind of taking away that stigma of talking about consent. So let's start off with the basics.
Yeah.
What is consent?
So to me, consent is everything. Before not knowing, now knowing, it's communication. It's asking for permission. It's making sure the person that you're involved with is taken care of. It's making sure that you're not, being selfish and just trying to fulfill whatever needs you have, and you're making sure that the other person's needs are also taken care of, or you're just making sure that person is good.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of the times when we use like the really hard and fast terms of like asking for permission, people imagine like, do I have your permission? And it's like awkward or whatever, but it definitely does not have to be that way.
Yeah.
Consent is something that has to happen, right? So if you are engaging with somebody, it doesn't matter if it's sex or even all the way down to hand holding, consent needs to be there. And it doesn't have to be this like super awkward moment,
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
It can be introduced in like a, hey, like, are you okay? Are you comfortable? Right?
Yeah, for sure. And so we have a few questions that we're going to go over and just talk about. And so the first question is, how do you tune in to your partner, Cece?
Man, I feel like that's such a good question. And before you're able to even tune into your partner, you have to be able to tune into yourself.
For sure.
Boom. Right?
For sure.
Let's end it right now. I'm
Mic
just
drop.
kidding. Right. No, I mean, it's so important, and it sounds cliche, right? They say like you have to love yourself before you can like love someone else.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's 100% true.
100%.
If you don't know what you want and you need and your standards or whatever, how are you even going to begin to understand someone else's?
Yeah.
Right? So I would say step 1 to tuning into your partner is tuning into yourself.
Yeah.
Figuring these things out about yourself, and then talking to your partner. We talk about communication a lot. You have to allow space for them to feel comfortable opening up, right? So instead of like an interrogation or being like, why don't we ever talk about this?
Yeah.
That's not inviting at all, right?
Yeah.
So creating that like comfortable space where you guys are able to have a conversation and just be vulnerable with each other.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say, how I would tune in to my partner is, every step of the way making sure she's okay. It doesn't have to be, like you said, that awkward feeling. It's just you are, taking the steps to make sure, hey, are you okay with this? Or hey,
Yeah.
are you okay with that? And so I'm just a big component now of just, asking questions and not just assuming. I think a lot of times we
Right.
get so caught up in the moment that we start assuming these things, and that assumption can sometimes get us in trouble. So tuning in means, watching her facial features, watching if her body is tense, the octave in her voice. Like you really, like she said, you really have to tune in to yourself in order to tune into other people. And so, tuning into your partner, I think, encompasses a lot of things. But to me, it's really, the focus is on the other person and not on you. I think that's big on tuning into your partner.
Yeah,
for sure.
I agree. So we kind of talked in the beginning, like how sometimes consent can be awkward or like taboo to talk about. Why do you think that is?
Because it's not something that we have learned over time.
Yeah.
Me growing up, in the culture that I grew up in, as far as, being in sports, being in the Army, in the oil field, this topic never came up. This was, we made assumptions. I think a lot of guys make assumptions. She smiled at me. That means she wants me, right? But it's not the case, she's just trying to be nice. And so I think, there's that where, we're not sitting down saying, have a conversation with the person versus just making assumptions about, what you think she wants.
Right.
Yeah.
And kind of going back to what you said about not being taught about consent, I mean, I can say that, even in school when we were learning other things, like in 5th grade, right, they started like teaching these classes. Consent was never taught, was never taught. And then, of course, parents might feel awkward talking to their kids about consent.
Yeah.
So it's just this like really vicious cycle of everyone being too shy to talk about it. And, you grow up and then you start, like you said, going to bars or going to places and like interacting with each other. And you start assuming instead of getting consent. And that's super dangerous.
I'm going to tell y'all something right now. In the 5th grade, I learned a lot about sex. And it wasn't from my parents. It was from all my little homies in the 5th grade. And so, like, if you're not going to teach your kids, somebody else's kids will probably teach them. And it was all the bad things that I was picking up and learning. And so it's just one of those things where, even if you don't know how to talk to your kids about it, you need to find out. Read a book, Google it, watch a video, figure it out, because your kids are going to learn it from somebody else if it's not going to be you. And it's as early as the 5th grade, and this was like, back in the day. But now, they have, phones, and I mean, it's very just, they have the information like right in their face at a very young age. So, yeah.
Let's kind of go back to what you were talking about, like if a girl or a person smiles at you at a bar and like you're automatically assuming that they want it.
For sure.
Let's go back to that.
It's entitlement, 100%. Like, you feel like because she's smiling, because she's giving you attention, that she wants you. And I can see now why a lot of, women, when a guy comes to them, they're like, boy, bye. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not giving you no attention because if I do, you're going to make that assumption, and I'm not trying to have that. So, I mean, I can see now, where that has come from, just from, my ignorance of thinking it as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Kind of speaking to that, I saw this like thing going around, this trend going around of like asking women, name 3 grown men that you would feel comfortable being in a room alone with, that and a lot of people were like, like I
couldn't name one, which is so sad.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. I think that there's a lot of like assuming when someone looks at you a certain way or someone's dressing a certain way, right? Assuming that they want to have sex and moving forward with that when that's not the truth, right? Someone's clothes is not going to tell you that. The way someone's looking at you is not going to give you consent. Consent can only be given verbally and enthusiastically. Yes. That's it.
And, back in the day, I assumed that if, she, reached her hand out without saying anything, or, if she like hugged back, or if she didn't say no, or
Yeah.
if she moved a certain type of way, then I assume like, oh, okay, this is happening.
Yeah.
Like, but there could also been like fear and just like, I can't believe what's going on or whatever.
Right.
And so, it's, that's another thing that, people need to understand.
Yeah.
It has to be spoken.
Yeah.
And it has to be enthusiastic. She cannot be high. She cannot be drunk. She cannot be tired, because at those moments you really can't consent to anything. And so, being real, I'm just going to be 100%. If you don't get consent, it is a crime. It is either rape, sexual assault, sexual harassment. Just point blank, period. It is a very serious crime. You can do very, very serious time. So it is of importance to make sure that if you are going to that next level, that you're having a conversation with her or him first before going to that next level. Yeah.
And another thing about consent is that someone can give consent before,
For sure.
the day before,
For sure.
whatever,
Yeah.
and change their mind, right?
Yeah.
And they can take away that consent at any time. They can take it away when they come to your house and see you. They can take it away in the middle of something. Once that consent is taken away and not given, it's over.
Yeah.
Right.
And we had there was a TikTok video of a guy that was on, I think, Tinder or a dating site, and they both swiped right or left. I don't know how
Whichever
that
way
works.
you match or whatever.
Yeah, and they matched up, and
Yeah.
she went over to his house, and she started recording him because he's like, "Why are you even here?" Because he assumed they were going to be hooking up, and she was there just to like chill and get to like know the person.
Right.
And so it was a big thing where, the guy felt entitled because she came over to his house. And instead of like, getting to know the person and talking with them, guys have a one-track mind. If she comes over here, there's a 75-25 chance. I'm not gonna lie. Whenever I was in college or whenever I was, out there dating or whatever, like if I was able to get her to the house, my assumption was like it was most likely going down that night.
Sounds like an animal catching their prey.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, that's really what it was. Like, it does sound like an animal catching their prey, but that's really what it was.
Yeah.
You would try to get them to the house because, that's where you felt like you can make them more comfortable. And so so it was a big deal where he's upset and angry because she's not giving in to his demands of sex, and she's like, dude, I just came here to hang out and talk to you.
Just because I come over to your house
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you're entitled
For
to have
sure.
sex with me.
For sure. Well, he thought so.
He thought so, yeah.
For sure.
So, as a man who has been married
Yeah.
multiple years now,
Yeah.
what about consent within long-term relationships or marriage?
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't change, regardless of if you're married for 15, 20 years or married for 2 years. One thing that does, I guess, help is, once you get to know that person, then you start to figure out, things about her. And so it's more maybe now of a look, like, if you've worked to if your relationship works that way, right? Where I can look at her or she can look at me, and that's, those are signals, and we've been like, I guess, working with those signals for a while. Then there's like an understanding.
Yeah.
But you still have to, verbalize, hey, this is what's going to happen, or this is what's going to go on.
Yeah.
Or just verbalize, hey, are you okay? I think, to me, that's the biggest, issue that men face, is they're so worried about themselves and worried about, what they're trying to get, that they don't care about the people that, they're trying to get with.
Yeah.
And so it still matters a lot, where you still have to have these conversations and say, hey, can I? Versus just making assumptions and taking it.
Right. And whenever I kind of explain that to people, I say it in the terms of like, especially if this person is your romantic partner, don't you
sure.
want them to feel comfortable? Right? Like, don't you
sure.
want them to enjoy whatever's going on?
Yeah.
I mean, at any time, right? But especially if this person is your romantic partner long term, you should want them to enjoy and be happy. So consent is necessary.
Yeah.
So I know we're streaming live right now, and if anybody has any questions for us about consent or anything that we've talked about, definitely drop it in the comment section and we can answer, but we'll
sure.
continue for now.
So one thing I want to address is you hear us saying a lot about men, and so I feel, me personally, like this is a man's issue.
Okay.
This is something that we as men have to address. We have to have conversations with our friends about, because what, 90%, 85 to 90% of, the sexual assault, the rape, is happening to women by men. And I'm not 100% on that stat.
It's near there.
Yeah. And so we talk about men because they're doing it more than women are at a very higher rate. And so it's not like an attack on men.
Right.
This is just information to there's other ways to communicate. There's other ways to I guess talk to women, to have a relationship with women, than to make that assumptions and think that she wants you.
So what can men do?
So I think tuning in to something like this, we have our own podcast and we talk about these things. Men have to stop being bystanders about the situations that's going on in the world.
And I think we're all guilty sometimes
sure.
of being bystanders
For sure.
of language or comments that are crossing the line or inappropriate, or it's a friend saying something, and we've all been there.
For sure. For sure.
But it's important. It's
Yeah.
important to tell them hey, that's not okay because whatever it is.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's to me that's the biggest thing. If we can help men to stop being bystanders about the things that are going on, I think that will kind of help push or propel us forward in society.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So this is kind of like a scenario.
Okay, let's hear it.
So if I'm flirting, or if I'm at a bar flirting, how do I know where the line is between playing hard to get and leave me alone?
Okay. Can you explain that more?
So can I say the question one more time or explain it?
Explain it.
Well, I guess if someone's at a bar, I'm pretty sure it's never happened to you, but I mean, from a guy's perspective, usually a guy is at a bar and there, and he's flirting with someone.
Okay.
And the person's either playing hard to get,
Okay.
or the person's saying leave me the heck alone.
Oh, I see.
So
where's the
Where's
line?
the line? Is there a line between those two?
Right. What do you think?
No, I think if they're saying no, they don't want you, then no, they don't want you.
Right. It's not like a joke.
Yeah.
Or...
But so I think another thing about men is if you tell me no,
it's like a challenge.
it's 100% a challenge. Oh, okay. No.
It's like everything's a competition.
Yeah,
huh?
okay. No, I got you. Okay, we'll see. Right.
Just wait.
Yeah, just wait.
By
And
the end of the night,
and I think that
eye roll.
that's creepy. Now I'm looking at it that's creepy.
You're
as
like, when you
heck.
say it out loud.
Yeah, it's just creepy. I'll wait because I'm gonna get you eventually. But like you said earlier, it's that it's a hunter trying to get his prey versus someone trying to have a relationship and make a connection with someone.
Yeah.
I was never trying to make a connection. Well, I'm not gonna say. Yeah, I was never trying to make a connection. There was always something that I wanted out of it.
Yeah.
And so yeah, now I'm thinking about it. Yeah, it is creepy if she's saying no, I'm good, bro. I don't want that drink, or you're not getting my number, or I don't want to talk. So.
And I think harmless flirting that's okay. But once you start like harassing somebody or physically touching somebody to try to like convince them, or like, you know, putting your arm or hand on their shoulder or their waist, that's not okay.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know, like, what is harmless flirting? Like, is that even a thing?
I mean, I do think that's a thing.
Okay, so can you explain more about,
I mean,
like, what?
if you're not berating somebody and like harassing them over and over, and you're like, it's a back and
you.
forth kind
I
of
got
thing.
you.
Both people seem to be having enjoying themselves within the conversation. That's okay. But like I said, trying to convince somebody over and over, right? Asking
Yeah.
the same question multiple times.
Yeah.
Like, can I get your number multiple times? No, right? Like, I'm
Yeah.
not playing, this is not me playing around. Or what are you doing after and I'm not telling you? That's it. Stop asking.
Yeah.
You know? And it's okay to ask those questions.
For
You
sure.
might get the answer that you want. Great. But if you get a no,
And walk away.
cut,
Yeah.
you know, cut it out.
Yeah, just walk away.
Take the L.
Yeah, take the L. And that's another thing that guys they have an issue with. They
Taking
have
the
an
L.
issue with taking the L. You know, they get upset and angry. They call them names like, well, I don't want to dance with you anyway. And then
Right.
they call you names. They call, you know, girls, women names and things of that nature. So, you know, learn how to take the L. Like, everyone's not going to be, you're not going to be everyone's cup of tea, and that's 100% okay. And also, one thing that I want to talk about is, like, pressuring a girl or a woman to give their number to you is trash.
Yeah.
And then, you know, if that relationship is started that way, then
Not a cute story.
I guess then that guy feels like, okay, if she tells me no, all I have to do is keep asking until I break her down until she says yes.
Yeah.
And at that point, you know, there's some issues going on with you know, manipulation.
Yeah.
And that's mental and emotional abuse of, like, if I don't, then this is what's probably going to happen. Or if I don't, he's not going to stop until. So,
I don't know how many times I've seen people give out fake numbers because of this.
for sure.
Because it's just like, okay, this person's not going to stop until I give them something.
For sure.
And that's not right.
No.
That's not okay.
It's not okay at all. And yeah, so the fake number happens after multiple times
Right.
of him, you know, not leaving her alone, and now, you know, she has to make something up to make him stop. And I have had a few in my day. I've had a few in my day. So it's not something that I'm proud of, but it's something that now that I know. I have, you know, nephews. I work with, you know, young boys, and so now I'm just letting them know, like, hey, this is where it's at. This is what you need to be doing. If you're doing this, it's creepy. Yeah. So stop.
Yeah. And
for
that's,
sure.
you know, that's growth. Like
Yeah,
you
for
know what I
sure.
mean? Turning that around and realizing.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's do a little recap of kind of like what we've said about consent.
Mm-hmm.
So consent is a verbal, enthusiastic yes. Verbal means speaking, right?
Yeah.
So to have consent from somebody, it has to be verbal and enthusiastic and clear. The person cannot be under the influence. If they are under the influence of drugs or alcohol, that is illegal. They cannot give consent. Another thing on consent that we've covered is consent can be taken and given away at any point. Right, so a person
sure.
can give consent at one point and then later on take it away, and that's their choice, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Making someone feel guilty for not giving consent is also wrong, right? If you're having to convince somebody to do something with you, that's not right, and that's not okay.
They're not enthusiastic about it if you have to convince someone to, like, give you their number or to, you know, hold their hands or to kiss you. So,
Right.
yeah. And that's a big component of it. You know,
Yeah.
it has to be enthusiastic, and then you have to communicate it. It just can't be assumed. Yeah,
What else
for
have we
sure.
covered? Those two things are like the main ones.
Yeah, I mean, and then tuning into your partner.
Yeah.
You know, just making sure that, you know, that they're okay, that they're good, and not just, you know, being one-track mind, tunnel vision, like not caring about anything but, you know, what it is that you're trying to do. So,
And then also speaking up, not being a bystander.
For sure.
When it comes to these jokes that are like cringy or borderline, or, you know, being the one to say, you know what, it's not okay to joke about that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So the last question is, it's kind of like, how do you draw the line between between harassment and harmless but unwanted advances?
And I feel like we kind of covered that, right,
Yeah.
in the question
Yeah.
about, like, playing hard to get
Yeah.
versus, like, a hard no, right? I think especially if it's someone that you're just meeting for the first time, like you meet when you're out or whatever, really, like, and you're not thinking about this in the moment, but you should be, like, reading their body language,
sure.
reading the vibe, right? And, like, seeing if this person is comfortable with what's going on.
Yeah.
And if anything, you want anything physical to happen, again, even if it's just a touch on the shoulder, a hand on the waist or whatever, you can't just touch people,
No,
right? Like, you
cannot.
need consent. You
do.
cannot just go up and touch people.
Yeah.
That is not okay, right? That is harassment.
And so people will probably ask, like, well, how do you do that? Well, you ask them, like, hey, can I touch you on your shoulder while we have this conversation?
Right.
Like, and she's like, no.
Don't
that's
do
your
it.
answer. Like, no. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, and it doesn't. So I would rather do that versus, like, put my hand around someone,
And then be
not
uncomfortable.
reading their body language, and they're
Yeah.
very uncomfortable, or putting my hand around someone and they, like, shimmy away, like, why are you touching me?
Yeah.
And so it's just always good to have, like, hey, can I, versus just assuming because y'all are vibing that is okay.
So how do we start these consent conversations with our friends and family?
So when I hear it, I have the conversation.
Okay.
When, like, anytime I hear, like, anytime I hear where I feel like there needs to be a conversation about consent.
Yeah.
And I have 3 sisters, and so they'll, we have, these deep conversations, and, I now I'm seeing what I have done to a lot of women back in my day. I just realized, like, hey, now with my nephews, this is not how you should be living your life.
Yeah.
This is not how you should be treating women and young girls. And so respect to me is, like, one of the biggest ones. Like, if you can respect yourself, then you respect the people around you. And so I'm really, trying to instill into, my little nephews, like, learning to respect yourself first, because I think that's where, respect from others come from.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think kind of like taking out that idea in your head that it's going to be a weird conversation.
Yeah, for sure.
You know what I mean? Like, if you just start talking to somebody about it and, like, taking the awkwardness out, trying to have a real conversation about it is important and makes it easier to do.
And even if it's awkward, you should still have the conversation. Like, even if it's awkward, just, have the conversation, because you're not only protecting yourself, but you're also protecting the person that you're involved with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for our parents that are potentially watching, at what age do you think we should start having conversations about consent?
10. Well, 10. And the reason why I say that is the average age of a young boy to start watching porn is 10. And so young boys start to objectify women and assume, like, my issue was women were human, but they weren't as human as men. And so that's where, like, my entitlement came from, the objectification of them. And so, like, I felt like, again, if she smiled at me, she wanted me, right? And so I think having the conversations at earlier ages and giving them information and giving them, like, these tools to help them understand, like, what is the right way of, speaking to a young woman versus the wrong way, and why you shouldn't, objectify and look at women in a certain way would help a lot. And so I think the average age on my end would be 10.
Okay. And, I definitely would agree. And consent is pretty, like, can be given examples from across the board, right? You can even teach, like, your little kid, like 5 years old, about consent.
sure.
Like,
For sure.
did you ask your brother if you could hug him, right? Like,
sure.
he has his own body and he makes his own rules about it. So before you hug him, be sure you ask him, which is consent.
For sure.
Like, just getting those little ideas in their heads, and then later on when they get older, telling them you also need consent for this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And consent is not just sex.
Like we said, yeah.
It's holding hands. It's putting a hand on the shoulder. If you want to touch her butt, you can't just go around touching her butt. You have to ask, like, hey, is this okay? If she says no,
Don't touch her
then
butt.
don't touch her butt. You know what I mean? Like, that's just what that is.
Right.
And so it doesn't have to be, it's communication. It's really talking to that person and making sure that that person is okay with, whatever it is that you're about to do. If you're going to step into someone's bubble, hey, is it okay if I get closer to you?
Yeah.
Versus just like, I've seen that where guys just like, they walk up on a person and it's, it's uncomfortable. And if someone doesn't feel like they don't have the assertive, I guess, power to like walk away or back up,
Right.
then they have to, stand there and just, feel awkward.
And uncomfortable.
And uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And no one should feel awkward and uncomfortable, having a conversation with, a person of the opposite sex or the same sex. I feel like it should be safe and secure and just like, it should be a beautiful thing, and I think we're making it way harder than what it needs to be.
And I also want to take another second. If anyone listening, watching has any questions, go ahead and drop it in the comments and we'll definitely get it answered. So another thing that I want to talk about is when I talk about consent to youth, right, to like high schoolers and they're in relationships, and I tell them that they need consent from their partner, they're always like, ugh, like I don't need, right, consent. That's like kind of their automatic answer. But I explain it this way. The person that you are in a relationship with could potentially not be comfortable holding hands at school, right? Or at their parents' house. They're not comfortable touching. And even when it comes to adults, maybe they don't like PDA. So when you're out and about at the grocery store, you know what I mean? They don't want you to touch them. And that's why it's so important. Consent is not just for sex at any age. It's for any sort of physical touch.
For sure. I think we have a few questions we can answer.
Yeah. What about consent in a long-term relationship? Let's reiterate that a little bit because it's such a good question and so important for people to realize.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you've been together for 2 months or 10 years, especially if you've been together for 10 years. We change over time,
For sure,
right?
for sure.
Our wants change over time, the things we're comfortable with, our bodies, how comfortable we are with our bodies changes over time. So even if you're in a long-term relationship, you
There-
need
there should
consent.
always be
And it should
consent.
be even less awkward if you're in a long-term relationship, right?
And
You
if
should
it's
feel comfortable.
awkward and y'all been together for 10 years, we need to communicate more, right?
Right,
Like
yeah.
there needs to be a better communication system because it shouldn't be awkward, in a long-term relationship. It should
Mm-hmm.
be something where both people feel safe. Both people feel safe to talk about, what it is that they're needing or they're asking. And if someone says no, it's a no. And I think a lot of times, and I've been in long-term relationships before being married, and I was a guy who would be like, well, if you don't give it to me, I'll get it from someone else. Yeah, which is
That's terrible.
which is 100%
Don't say
terrible. Don't say that. Because, at this point, again, you're not paying attention to what it is that she is needing.
Right.
And you're so focused on what you need that you're pushing people away or you're becoming this monster that you never thought you could be.
Yeah.
By doing that. So in long-term relationships, it is still the choice of the people in that relationship to either do or not do,
Yeah.
and you still have to make sure before you just do it, regardless of if y'all been together long or not.
And if you've never talked about consent and you want to start talking about consent in your long-term relationship, it's okay that you haven't talked about it. Right? Don't feel embarrassed that you haven't, or like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we've been married 5 years and we've never had this conversation. Now's the time to do it, right?
sure.
It's never a bad time to start having that conversation. And I know life can get busy. I know in my personal relationship, we dedicate like about an hour on like a weekend night to just talk about like this week, like when you did this on this day, like it made me uncomfortable, whatever, right? Just like setting aside a time when you are just talking, no phones, no eating in front of you, no TV, just having conversation and setting aside that time to talk is really important. And that's when you can bring something like this up,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So the question, the answer is consent should be always in short-term, long-term relationships. There should always be communication there. There should always be consent.
Even if
where-
it's something you've done 1,000 times.
for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
You
for
still
sure.
need consent.
You still need consent. Yeah. For sure. I don't think we have any more questions.
Yeah.
So you want to wrap it up, or how long is
Yeah.
it supposed to be?
I'm not sure, but I think we covered a lot
We did
of
cover a
good
lot.
things.
Okay, yeah.
You know, when it comes to consent. And like Aaron said, we talk about these topics on our podcast a lot. It's called Unplugged, Surviving to Thrive. You can find it on all podcast streaming platforms. But it's so important to have these conversations. So thank you guys for watching, and continue to have these conversations with people around you,
for
people in your life, family members, friends, even co-workers, right? Your kids. It's so important to have conversations about consent because, like Aaron said, young people are not learning it anywhere else from a good source.
From a good source.
Right?
for
So let
sure.
that good source be you. For any parents watching, let that good source be you.
And I think if you have any questions and you're curious or just kind of want to know, like, hey, is this consensual? You can always reach out to us. We're on, Facebook, Instagram,
Yeah.
TikTok, and Snapchat, I believe, right? And then you can also call us at the Crisis Center, and it's 432-333-2527. And this is what we do. We're advocates for, just getting this information out, having these conversations, and just kind of seeing where it goes from there. So, yeah, if you're curious about it, or you want to know more, you can reach out to us so we can kind of give you where to go to learn more about what consent is.
Yeah.
So,
Awesome.
yeah.
Well, thank you guys for tuning in. We hope you learned something about consent and feel a little bit more comfortable having these conversations. We appreciate you guys tuning in and watching.
All right. Y'all have a good one.